Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Paul Thomas. Paul is a clinical hypnotherapist, has a thriving practice in Sydney, and is also the founder of Self-Help for Life. And Self-Help for Life has there's a blog and podcast. We're going to find out more about that. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thank you, Jonno.
It's great to have you on. So if you can unpack a little bit more for everyone what it is you do in the various hats you wear.
Yeah, sure. So in Sydney, as I say, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. What it says on my website is I help people resolve personal, emotional, and habitual problems, which I think sums up most of what people come to see me for. So whether it's addictions such as alcohol, binge eating, or habits like nail biting, or more emotional things dealing with anxiety, depression, sometimes pain management as well, physical symptoms which can often have sometimes some mental kind of emotional causes as well. And then I also run Self Help for Life, which is a blog, a YouTube channel and podcast that helps people become a better you. The idea started in 2017, and it came from the idea that, a dog is for life, not just for Christmas. And so much of Self Help for Life, we read a book and we put it down and we don't really apply it to life. So what I wanted Self Help for Life to be is like learning the tools, the techniques to help you be a better you in the long term. So the things that work long term, and less about the kind of hacks and quick mind fixes that often we hear that are topical and then don't really go through the test of time. So if that makes sense. So really about long-term personal change.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you for sharing that. So it's always wonderful to hear a little bit about someone's story. So I'd love to hear, Paul, some of those moments, even as far back as childhood, little Paul. What were some of those moments as you reflect?
Okay, all right. Okay.
What are some of those moments that really shaped you to become the person and the leader, the leader that you are today and the thought leader?
Okay. Yeah, well, look, I had a varied childhood. It was pretty good generally. I was born in New Zealand, in Dunedin, and my parents are English, and they decided when I was 8 years old that they were going to go back to the UK. And, I think before the age of 8, I was a pretty happy kid, had some nice friends, and, was really enjoying life. And then at the age of 8, came to the UK, very, very different education system, much more formal. I found it really difficult to make friends. I used to talk to the dinner ladies at the school I was in, which was near Manchester, and really struggled with that adjustment. And so I think that's when I sort of started to maybe realise that there's some challenges ahead and that kind of thing, and I overcame them. Not just the social side, but also academically, I was a bit behind, and my mum helped me with that. So I think that's when I sort of realised a little bit about self-improvement, that kind of thing. I then went on to be quite musical, so I played the French horn and in various orchestras. And when you play in an orchestra, there's different parts. So you can be, in the case of a horn section, there's 4 parts. So there's first horn, which has all the solos, and then there's second, third, and fourth. And third is like the next best. That tends to have a few solos as well. So I was always striving to move my way up the horn section. And when I did get to play first horn, I realised actually there is quite a lot of leadership around that. The way that I'm playing, the way that I may be taking notes of things that the conductor might say, and just my whole presence is going to influence the people, down the line in a way. So I think that's when I got my first sense of leadership in a way. And then when I first started reading personal development books was really, I think I went to a very interesting talk that was about stress, and I was in my final year at university, and I wasn't particularly looking forward to going into the working world. I really enjoyed university, and he just talked about, at that time, now this is early 90s, okay, so he's talking about the 3 main stresses being the fax machine, okay, we can replace that with email now and instant messaging, the clock, well, that's still pretty much there, isn't it, and TV, which we could again replace with TV and the internet now, but the fact that we're getting all this information being bombarded at us at an ever higher rate, and they were the 3 main stressors. And he also talked about how so many people just go through 40 years of life just getting really, really stressed about things. And I sort of decided in that session I wasn't going to be that person, okay? To some degree I have at times in my life, but I didn't want to be that person who just did the whole corporate thing. So that's really where that came from.
Wow.
And then so I started getting into a bit of personal development then. So that's really where it started. And
can I ask you a question? Yeah, that's such an interesting decision to make. How old were you at the time when you said you were sitting in that session and you made that decision?
So I was about 22, 23. So I went to university a bit later than most people. So I was probably about 22. Yeah.
How did you... that's just a really interesting reflection and such a decisive moment. What were you feeling in that room, and what was it... Can you remember... why was that such a watershed sort of, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to pursue this moment for you?
I think it was probably more negative reasons than positive reasons. I just didn't want to go through that really stressful, long hours corporate life. And I had worked briefly with someone who had been through that life a few years earlier. I had a little job that I did between school and university, and this guy was retired. He'd come up from London, done the whole working in an investment bank, and he was just doing this really junior clerical job that I was doing as well. And I think he told me quite a lot about that lifestyle and the commuting to London and all that sort of thing as well. And I just decided I didn't want that. I just didn't want that to be me. I didn't want to have that kind of normal life. I guess I've always seen myself as maybe a little bit different, and I didn't want to have that normal life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I always find it really interesting to understand those sort of moments where you can look back and go, yeah, actually that was when it was in that room where I really went, So yeah, thanks for unpacking that. Please continue.
That's it. Yeah, so and actually getting into personal development was actually more a little bit art. That kind of gave me my first taste of it. And I did read a couple of books. Maxwell Maltz Psycho-Cybernetics was one of the first books I read, and Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, were two big books I read about that time. But actually, when I got more into personal development, it was actually more to do with dating. Okay, so I was struggling with dating and social confidence generally. And I was like, I was in my 20s, and I hadn't helped myself by going to a very male-dominated university that was focused on engineering and sports, and then going and working for London Transport. Think of the equivalent of working for New South Wales Transport or Brisbane Transport, where most people there are men. Okay, so I hadn't helped myself by any means. The only thing I went to where I met a lot of women was orchestras, and nearly everyone was in a relationship, so it wasn't that easy. So I started learning a bit about skills to become better at communication, social confidence, and that's when I discovered neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and hypnosis kind of is similar in some ways to that. So I did NLP practitioner training, and I used that purely to just help me get better at dating. That was all I was interested in. In my 20s, I had no other real interests. I wasn't, say, that career-minded. I'd say I probably wasn't really being a leader at that point. That's the only thing I wanted to. But I believed I could get better at it. I believed it was a learnable skill. And and I did. By the end of my 20s, I met my wife, and the rest is history, really. So yeah. So that was really how I got into personal development. And then I think after that, in my 30s, I didn't do much with it because life was going well. I was in a happy relationship. I was working as a corporate software trainer in a law firm. I was traveling all around the UK and around Europe as well, training different legal systems. And again, I was working as a team of trainers, and I was finding I was becoming a bit more of a leader. Although my job was the same as everybody else, I was finding that I was generally pushing things along a bit quicker, coming up with lots of new ideas in meetings, so I could see myself being, again, a bit different, being able to go that one step further than maybe other people were prepared to go, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question that pops into my mind, what did you learn when you, and I love, well, actually, before I ask this, I love how you said, honestly, for you, what got you really interested in some of the things now that have really been career defining, and you're, and really helping people was, for you to around dating. And it's funny, you reminded me of the episode I had on the podcast, Guy Kawasaki, who has written 15 books and worked with Steve Jobs, and just an incredible man and great thinker. But he started off telling his story, and I was saying, when did you sort of first get passionate about business and entrepreneurship? And he told the story, which people can go and listen to, of how it was actually seeing his friend's dad's Porsche. And he was just like, you know what? I need to get myself one of those. And it was so funny because he's saying people think, now obviously he really loves investing in people and helping others, but he sort of said, my real passion for all of this didn't start from some altruistic. It was, in his teens going, wow, what do I need to do to get myself a Porsche? And I love the fact that that's, it's not linear, the journey. Sometimes the thing that opens the door to go and do something that becomes really meaningful and significant starts as something really, really funny, like wanting to have a Porsche, or wanting to understandably, find out how can I improve my dating life. So I wanted to ask you, what did you learn about dating? I know that's probably not so much a focus now, but when you were early on, you're just new to understanding some of this. What were the biggest things that you learned in that season?
I think the biggest thing I learned was right at the end, really, before I met my wife, which was that when you overcome a fear, that in a way, slightly metaphysically, life changes. So to give you an example, my biggest fear had really been to go to a nightclub or a bar, busy bar, and just go and talk to a girl. I'd just never been able to do that. I could do it in other situations, but I just couldn't do it in that sort of nightclubby type situation. And I'd met I met someone else who was up for working together with this. So basically egging each other on to do it, and so we did it. And that Saturday night, I remember overcoming that fear, and then literally a couple of days later, I meet in a more conventional setting where it's a bit easier to talk to people. More like it was kind of like a social activities club, which I was more comfortable with. Meeting my wife Rita. At that event. So it was almost like I had to overcome that fear, and then the universe, metaphysics, whatever you want to call it, however you think about that, basically said, well, you've done that now, so now I'm going to give you what you want. Okay, you've got to get through this little step, and then we'll give you what you want. And I think that's really, really interesting how that happened. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I have so many questions I want to ask you, because I know that your work and what you do is so important for leaders, because that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast. Is it's leadership conversations, and I love having leaders, thought leaders, CEOs on, and helping people to realize that one, every leader is just a person, and one of the biggest things that comes out of the podcast is that everyone you're leading is a person. So actually it comes back to people, so for yourself but also for others, is just understanding people. So maybe a helpful starting point for me, because I've got 20 questions in my mind, but what do you see for leadership, managing people, leading people, as a small business leader or as a CEO or as a manager with a team? What do you see as the biggest challenge for leaders to lead and manage people well, from your perspective?
It's a difficult one. I mean, I've not managed that many people myself. I did have a couple of VAs a couple of years ago as Self Out for Life, and I have done a couple of jobs where I've managed people. I would say, really, it's a case of trying to ascertain what drives them in a way. What is their why? If they have a why. I did work with a couple of people, actually. They were like in their 50s and I was in my 30s. And they'd done the same job for years and they were happy. And I would do a performance appraisal with them. And I say, well, what do you want to gain? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And they say, I just want to be doing the same job I am now. So I think knowing where the people that you're leading want to be in life, and being okay with the fact that maybe they're happy to do the same thing for a few years. They've got no ambitions beyond that. And then I think beyond that, just being inclusive. I'm a big believer in the idea of walking the talk. So actions speak louder than words. So it's not what you say, it's what you do. So I'm very much a believer of walking the talk. Always happy to do things that I would expect other people to do myself. So I know what's involved with that. I know with Self Out for Life, before I outsourced a few tasks, I did them all myself and worked out exactly how to do them, and thought about if I was training someone else how to do them, how they'd do that. Does that kind of answer the question? Probably not.
No, it does. It's great because it helps me segue into the next.
Helps,
Well,
exactly,
I want to ask you, what does it look like to understand people better? Like if there's a leader listening who's really scratching their head about some people on their team, what advice would you give us around whether it's people on our team, even people in our lives, our friends and family, about what it looks like in a healthy way to really understand, grow in empathy, I guess understanding others and being able to relate well to others. It's a pretty broad topic, but I know what are your thoughts on that?
I've got some. I mean, I would probably use some of the stuff I've learned from neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. One of the things there is that we all think in three main ways, which is by imagining things in our mind, by thinking, self-talk, and by feeling. Okay, but most people tend to use one more than the other. So someone who's more visually minded will be imagining things. And I was actually helping someone with an interview situation a few weeks ago, and I was saying to her, if you can start, when you're answering the questions, talk in such a way that the interviewer imagines you in the role, then unconsciously they're going to be seeing you in the role, and without even realizing it, they're probably more likely to. And she did get the job, by the way, as well. So getting back to what I was saying, so some people are more visual, and they'll tend to use words like this is a bright future, I can see this clearly, that sort of thing. So if you can start using that sort of language, so visual words, so bright, clear, illuminating. And then other people, which includes me actually, are more auditory. So they'll say things like, sounds good to me, as clear as a bell, that kind of thing. So if you hear people saying those words, try and feedback that kind of language pattern as well. And then some people are more kinesthetic, so feeling oriented. So they've got to grasp something. They've got to get a hold on something, okay? So again, you can use those kind of words back. And another thing is, visual people tend to talk quite fast. Auditory people tend to talk a bit more slowly, a bit more resonating, and kinesthetic people tend to talk even slower. So if you can pace their voice tonality as well, that can really help. Okay, so you've got the language, the voice tonality, and also things like the volume as well can help.
Yeah.
And then with that, some people are more analytical and some people are more emotional. So generally just using some of the words that they're using and feeding them back can really help you begin to understand their world. And I think another thing you could do as well is actually just imagine being in their shoes. So imagine almost taking on their body posture, the way they hold themselves, and just getting a sense of, if you were saying what you want to say to them, if you were hearing that as the other person, that will often give you some really interesting perspectives that you wouldn't have thought of. So hopefully that'll help and give some actionable things you can do there.
Yeah, I like that. That's so. What are the? Can you just go over again? What are the ways you say someone comes in to work with you and you're trying to pick up on how they're wired? So what are the things you're looking for to work out whether they're kinesthetic or auditory, or if they're visual? Can you just go over again? What are some things to look for?
Yeah, sure. So so visual, they'll tend to talk more quickly. They'll be using words like see, bright, clear. Also, this is getting a little bit more technical now. I can't remember exactly, but their eyes will tend to look up. So if you're imagining things or remembering things, your eyes have to look up. Okay, one is left and one is right, and I can't remember off the top of my head which is which, but technically you can actually tell if someone's lying by the way that their eyes look. So they're called eye accessing cues in NLP. So if people are interested in that, they can Google that and find out more about that. So yeah, that, and then just you can begin to kind of match their body posture as well. This is something I learned in the dating world, is being able to kind of match the way that somebody looks. And when you do that, you'll get more of a sense of their world. So that can help as well. Does that kind of answer the question? So
no, it does. It's really interesting. I mean, you're talking about mirroring there. Is that mirroring in terms of?
That's it. Yeah. Matching and mirroring. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you can take that one step further as well. Once you've got really good matching and mirroring, then you can start to lead. And one of the best things, and I use this quite a lot in hypnotherapy sessions, is if you can mirror someone's breathing, that can be really effective. It's not always possible, but if you can see their breathing, you can start to mirror that. And I've sometimes had people that just gone into hypnosis and they're breathing really fast, and I'm thinking that's unusually fast, so I'll sort of breathe quite fast with them, and then I'll start to slow down my breathing, and usually their breathing will start to slow down as well. So that's really powerful if you can do that. Yeah,
that's really great. It's because I think these are the sort of things that sometimes we're just completely unaware of, and just having that awareness as
Absolutely.
a leader, when I sit down in a one-on-one, and we can just be thinking, okay, what am I, I've got this one-on-one for half an hour, but these are the sort of things that we can slow down and actually think and try to understand, listen. I find mirroring the speed that someone else speaks at is something that I found really easy to do.
Yeah.
And my background in particularly business development sales, I remember when I learnt this and I thought, I'll try it, and I was shocked at some of the people that I would connect with who a lot of people were pretty similar to me, so it's not hard. Every now and then I remember, and it even happens now, I'll talk to someone and they speak so fast that I then go, okay, I'm going to commit to try to speak at the same speed, and it's exhausting. Just a 15-minute conversation with them. For me, I sort of have to have a couple of minutes where I just have a breather, but I've experienced how much it's like a bit of a click. It's like for them, it's like something clicks, and it's like, okay, here's someone that I wonder if intuitively they find other people. They must find a lot of people slower. So when you come up to meet their speed, it's like it does really help to gel with communication. But also the opposite. I remember having someone who was the slowest speaker, which it's interesting you mentioned kinesthetic, because I hadn't heard that before. Where they spoke so slowly, had such long pauses to the point where I would think they were finished, but then they'd start speaking again. And so I tried to really slow down my speaking and felt really weird doing it. But once again, I found that once I did that, it just helped us communicate. I just felt like I was speaking the same language. It just felt like our sort of flow in how we were talking was much better. So that's something that I've found really helpful.
Yeah, because just listening, your pace is probably a bit slower than mine. So I'm guessing you're probably either more auditory like me, or maybe more kinesthetic. I'll see if I can listen out for some of the words as we continue. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah, we can have this as a live sort of experience. Yeah. Absolutely. I think for me, it's and this is, don't want to turn this into a session. Just take advantage of you, Paul. Just get people on my podcast to help me. That could be a new that could be a really clever idea. But I find auditory. It's interesting for me. I love audiobooks. I love podcasts.
Yeah.
And I find that so I haven't read a paper book, like actually read a paper book or ebook in years. I do everything audiobook.
Oh wow.
And podcast. It's even interesting, you'll notice that when we do this podcast, I even have the cameras turned off, partly because of Australia and bandwidth, and our internet is particularly where I am here, we only have one provider, and it's funny, people on the other side of the world will be thinking, what, in Australia? Don't you guys have amazing technology? Well, our internet is pretty average, but it's also, I think it's also something, like I really enjoy coaching. If someone insists on it being visual, then I'm happy to do that, but I do a lot of my coaching just over the phone, and for me that's fine, but that's probably a reflection of the fact that I'm auditory.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I agree, and I'm a bit like you. I tend to prefer audiobooks. One of the reasons on my website, so selfhelpforlife.com, one of the reasons I do videos, podcasts and blogs is to cater for those three different types of almost like learning styles as well. So
yeah, that's clever.
So if people want to see me, they can do the video, they watch the video. If people want to hear me, because it's quite hard to listen to a YouTube video unless you've got YouTube Premium. You can't listen to it in the background. So all I do with my podcast, it's very simple. I just take the audio from the video and turn it into a podcast episode and put a different intro and outro on it. So all you hear on the podcast is the videos, basically, is the audio. And then the blog, either me or I get sometimes someone else to write the blog posts, which are a summary of the videos. So the video's got everything in it. The blog will have some of it. So if people who do prefer to read, I've got that as well. So yeah,
that's gold. I love that.
So I find that's really good. Yeah, it's great. And it has other benefits as well. It has obviously SEO benefits, having the blog posts and that sort of thing. So
yes,
it seems to be a good thing to do. But yeah, like you, I find it very hard. My wife can read like a 500-page book in like a week. For me, it will take me over a month. It's so much harder to do. Yeah.
It's funny that I've even I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I've even experimented with speeding up my listening, and I came across this idea of speed listening, which I found really interesting. And so I've practiced it where I've just experimented with it, particularly with non-fiction books where I'm rereading because I loved it so much. I just want to go over it again, and I'll do up to 3.5 times speed. Which at first sounds like gibberish, but you can actually get used to it. But it's I realized when I was chatting with my friends about this, they all just thought I was crazy. They were like, why on earth would you want to do that? And I just thought it was really interesting that for me, this was something where I thought, this is amazing. I think it's once again, it might be a reflection that I find it so natural to be listening that I can really speed something up and still feel like it doesn't drive me crazy. Whereas, I listen to a lot of things at faster speeds, and then whenever I'm showing something to my wife Liz, she'll be like, oh my goodness, please put that back to normal speed. That is hurting my brain. I cannot watch that for 10 seconds. So I do that on YouTube a lot. I love watching things at double speed on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, it's good you can do that, isn't it? Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe I don't know if once again if that's auditory. So for people who are listening, for leaders who want to understand themselves better, we've talked about some of these things. Is there anything else? So this is one really important element. We've talked about understanding others. What about understanding yourself? If someone came into a session with you and said, "Help me, Paul. I really want to get to know myself and how I'm wired better." What are some of the key things, knowing that you spend, this is your world. So just as a quick introduction, what are some of the things people should lean into, check out, as well as this idea of auditory, visual, kinesthetic?
I think, and this probably just goes at a more general level as well, is really just seeing what makes you feel good and what doesn't, in a way. So, when you're leading, when you reflect back on, the past, the last year or two or whatever, what are the kind of leadership things you've done that have made you feel good? And what are the ones that haven't? And that'll kind of give you a bit of an idea of maybe the kind of values that run. Maybe you have, an importance of things like participation or trust or collaboration. If those kind of values are quite important to you, then that will help. It's a bit of a vague answer, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Sometimes we can learn a lot by just being very aware of actually what feels good in previous times and sort of going with that. And you're also trusting your gut and your intuition as well. That can be really helpful as well. So, yeah. I think just know what your values are, really. Yeah.
How, if someone is listening going, I need to do that, but I don't know how, what would be sort of an exercise, or if someone was sitting in the room with you and said, I don't know what my values are, what would you have them do as a starting point to clarify that?
Some kind of sort of journaling type thing, I would say, but I would say, just reflect on, when in a leadership situation where you felt good about something, what was going on there, what were you seeing, what were you hearing, what were you feeling? And what was it about that made you feel good? And I think if you take that, you just sort of chunk that down a bit, then you'll still eventually get to those kind of core values kind of things. So, I might ask a question, well, this situation, what does that give you? And I'm looking for a feeling or emotion to come through. Or when you do that, question I quite often say to people is, it feels as if. So if we're going through a kind of a bit of a journey of past experiences or whatever, I might say, and it feels as if, and they'll say, and that will usually, the answer to that will normally be a belief. Okay, so it feels as if I'm offering value, could be a good, or it feels as if I'm good at this way of leading, or feels as if I'm a good communicator, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that can bring up kind of beliefs. So yeah, probably unpacking kind of people's beliefs about things, that sort of thing. I know that when I worked with a couple of VAs, that what was important to me was that sense of that I wanted it to have kind of a good culture. So I wanted to be quite collaborative. I wanted them to be able to think for themselves. I wanted them to work together. Those kind of things. That was quite important to me, that it was quite inclusive in a way, and that we were all seen as equal and working together as part of a team. So yeah, that was just what felt right for me, really. That makes sense? Does that make sense, Jonno?
So Paul, for leaders who are listening who want to understand their own values better, what advice would you give about how someone can do that?
I would say look back at things that you're doing that make you feel good. So look back at leadership type situations that you feel good about, you feel that's the right way of doing things. Once you do that, you can kind of work out what I sometimes say is, if you have that, what does that give you? And that what does that give you question will often lead to feelings and emotions. So it might be a sense of camaraderie, it might be a sense of peace, happiness, a sense of feeling that what you're doing is fulfilling, it's giving value, that kind of thing. So really just being very self-aware. Journaling can help with this as well. So that's probably where I would go with that.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love, I think journaling is really underrated. I feel like it's coming out more and more and it'll be interesting. I don't really know much about the research behind it, but I just keep seeing it. When I read a great book or I come across something that I find really helpful, it'll often have journaling. There's something about getting it out of your head, which I don't know if you find this with hypnotherapy, but I find that for me, I definitely find that for coaching, one of the biggest things people say is, I always ask at the end of a session, what did you find most helpful? And probably 90% of the time, it's just having the space and the time with someone who's really, really listening and leaving a lot of space for them to talk things out as well. And it's amazing how much that comes out from 90% of my sessions. 10% of the time, it'll be something I said. And 90% of the time, it's actually just the space created for them to clarify their own thoughts.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd say I have the same experience as well. I think being able to verbalize your thoughts, whether you do that on paper or whether you do that in a therapy or counseling or coaching session, is really important. There's something about hearing yourself saying things. You could probably even say these things out loud to yourself, potentially. But yeah, writing them down certainly helps. There's something about that, it just makes it more meaningful. I suppose it's similar to writing out your goals. When something's in your head, it's less tangible. But when you write it out, then it's much more real. So yeah, definitely. One of the things I'm often doing in hypnotherapy sessions is getting people to really verbalize maybe difficult things from the past. Maybe something happened when they were 7 or 8 years old, and at that age they couldn't verbalize that to their parents because they were too young, or they didn't know the words to say, or they were afraid of them, all those sorts of things. So in fact, getting them under hypnosis quite often to be able to verbalize and express those feelings back to those people can often have quite a cathartic influence and help kind of heal things from the past and change the memory. So yeah, definitely really important.
Well, I'd love to invite you back for another episode down the track, Paul. It would be great to do another episode where we can focus more on hypnosis and actually have you sort of unpack a little bit about that and what you do. And because I think it's a topic that a lot of leaders could benefit from that I haven't really talked much about. So because we haven't really spoken too much about that, even though that's your sort of wheelhouse. But so maybe another episode down the track we could focus on that.
Absolutely, that'd be great. That'd be really good. Yeah.
To wrap up today, let's just do a couple of the Leadership Express questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yep.
Okay. Firstly, what's a book that you've gifted to other people?
I can only think of one book that I've ever. So what we're saying here is given to somebody else. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm clear of that. Okay. I think I've only ever done this once, and it was You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, and it was fairly recently, 4 or 5 years ago, to someone that was with cancer. And because that book just talks a lot about mental and emotional impacts of all the different illnesses, I just felt it was a book he needed to read. So, yeah.
Yeah, a wonderful recommendation, and thanks for sharing that story. Do you have any favourite questions that you ask in a session with someone to understand them better, in social settings? Any favourite questions?
I've got a couple of what I call magic questions that I use in therapy, and you have to have good rapport to ask these questions. But one of them will be, is there anything that you find it difficult to talk about? Okay, so I'll sometimes ask that question. And the other question, again, you've got to have great rapport to do this, and I often say it in a bit of a jokey way as well, is like, is there anything you've never told anyone? Okay, is there anything you've never told anyone? And I'll sort of say, look, there might not be, and that's okay, and but that can sometimes bring something that, because people often resist change.
Yes.
So they might be thinking something, but if you can just invite them to do that. So obviously I wouldn't use those in social situations, but I use those in therapy. Look, there's a few questions that I think are really good. People, again, this could be a whole different topic of NLP, meta model, which is all about language. But if people say things like, everyone hates me, then I'll say, everyone? Or when you say everyone, well, who specifically? And they'll say, oh, my mum or my dad or my best mate or worst enemy, whatever. So that's a good one. Another one is, in what way? So when someone says, let's think, people treat me badly, I'll say, well, in what way? And if someone says, I feel sad, I might say, sad in what way? So in what way, what kind of? Just really open, really simple questions. There's probably about a dozen of them that are really useful. But I find I use those a lot, and they will just give me more information. So when someone's very vague about something, that will give me more information.
That's fantastic. I love that. In what way? That's great for leaders in one-on-ones when you're unpacking with someone, and how you're finding everything at the moment. Well, the past couple of weeks has actually been really positive. Oh, positive in what way? Or I'm feeling really... I'm actually feeling really frustrated just with this one project. Oh, really frustrated in what way? I mean, I'm not using them perfectly. I'm just sort of thinking out loud about how you could...
Or what kind of frustration, or what kind of things are making you frustrated? What's it like feeling frustrated? All those, there's so many of them. It's I should do a blog post on them and list them all.
You should. You should, and you know what? Do that for leaders and share it with me, and I'll get it out. I think this is so good, honestly, Paul, because it's simple. This is the thing that a lot of people think, they scratch our head about how we can be better leaders. And these are the sort of things where, okay, well, as a starting point, if you listen better, if you sit down when you're with your people, if you have some of these in your pocket, I love, one of my favorites is Unpack That For Me. I don't know why. Someone used that with me once and I found it really helpful. And I love saying, someone will give me some sort of general comment or statement, and I'll say, or they'll talk about, that they'll say, this person I'm just finding, we've been working together a couple of years, but recently they've really been grating on me. And they'll talk about something different, and I'll come back and say, okay, you talked about the fact that this person's really grating on you. Unpack that for me. And so that's my tell me more about it, or in what way. And so I think having a bunch of these questions it just gives you this repertoire to keep someone talking, which is honestly where most people, it builds rapport, it helps you understand them better, it stops you from just talking at them, and it really helps people that you're leading to feel comfortable bringing out some more of their own thoughts.
Exactly. And if you've got any therapists listening, I always avoid saying, how does that make you feel? I've always found that's a real cliche. So my alternative is, are there any feelings or emotions? Because there may not be any feelings. So I'll say, Are there any feelings or emotions? And in that way, you know, they'll say, well, yeah, feeling of anger. I'll say, well, what kind of anger? Anger in what way? So yeah, that's another good one as well.
That's gold. So good, Paul. What a gold nugget right at the end of the podcast. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And we 100% have to do that.
Yeah.
We should honestly. You should write a bunch of questions, and if you can share that blog post with me, I'm going to put that out there to my audience, because I think that would be helpful. Please. So good. Okay. Okay. Couple more questions. This is one I love asking everyone who comes on the podcast. What's a movie or TV show that really impacted you?
Movie or TV show? Ooh, really impacted me. I used to love watching The Apprentice when I was in the UK with Lord Sugar. I know there's the Donald Trump version as well, but it's a shame it's not in Australia. Actually, they had Celebrity Apprentice, but for anyone who's not seen this, it's basically people set a series of business tasks, and they're quite old school business tasks as well, like selling things at a market, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And they do it in teams, and they have to work together, and they always seem to do it so badly. And I think the reason for that is because they set really crazy time pressures, like they've got to sell everything within 24 hours, that kind of thing. So I just find that really fascinating to watch, and I think I'd like to think I've learned some things about business from that. But yeah, I think I miss the fact it's not in Australia, and even trying to watch previous episodes in the UK and Australia is quite hard. So yeah. No, that's a great recommendation. And Dragon's Den as well. Again, I think it's got different names, but that's a good one. Yeah, that comes up a lot. It's probably the most recommended, actually, which really? is
okay. Because I think it makes perfect sense, particularly because you're getting this compressed environment of how to sell, how to listen, how to analyze data, all in this compressed. It's actually. It's been surprising how often it's come up. But when you think about it, it's not surprising. Okay, one more question to land, because I'm having too much fun. I'm looking at the time. I should finish up. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader who sat down with you over coffee and said, Paul, what advice would you give me? What would you say?
I think basically walk your talk. Actions speak louder than work. There's another way of saying it. I'm trying to remember what it is now. I learned it from a guy called I can't remember his name as well. The goals guy. Anyway, but yeah, walk the talk. Actions speak louder than words. Behavior never lies. That's what he says. Behavior never lies.
I like that.
If you Google the goals guy, he's Gary somebody. He's written a course called the 100-Day Challenge. But yeah, behavior never lies. So, and that's so true in so many areas of life. So always walk your talk. Don't promise things that you can't deliver, or try to avoid doing that. Sometimes it's best to actually promise less and deliver more, rather than the other way around. So that's what I would definitely suggest.
Yeah, Gary Ryan Blair.
Gary Ryan Blair, that's him. Yes, Gary Ryan Blair, that's it. Yeah,
that's a wonderful. Behavior never lies. Ooh, that's a good one. I'm gonna use that. That's wonderful. Oh, that's so good. I'm excited about. So you go.
I was just going to say, Gary Ryan Blair, he's interesting because he basically was a Navy SEAL, so he's got a very, very pragmatic kind of approach to things. So if you quite like that sort of pragmatic, just in your face approach, you'll like Gary. So
wonderful. Great recommendation. Well, Paul, for those who have just really loved today and really want to check out whether they're visual or auditory or kinesthetic, the different channels you have, can you just remind us where people can find you and your clinical hypnotherapy practice and self-help life, where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure. So selfhelpforlife.com is where you'll find all my videos and podcast episodes and blog posts. So you can go to there. If you want to find me on YouTube, it's just youtube.com/selfhelpforlife. Podcast, I can't remember, but you can find it via the website. So that's on there. I think it's just selfhelpforlife.com/podcast, I think it is. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you can do that via selfhelpforlife.com, but you can also go to my hypnotherapy website, which is harbourhypnotherapy.com.au. So that's harbourhypnotherapy.com.au. And on there you can find all the things that I help people with. So that's different. That's not really a blog. That's just a website that explains what I do. So by all means, check that out as well.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Some great tips and nuggets, and also wonderful stories today from Paul. Don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast for you to check out. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Paul Thomas. It's been a joy. I can't wait to do another episode where we chat more about hypnotherapy and hypnosis. But today's just been so good. I'm thinking of all these questions in my brain, which I'm going to go away and jot down. That's just one thing. There's been so many really valuable points out of our conversation. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Paul.
Thank you so much, Jonno. Thank you for inviting me.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.